Today, cryptocurrency prices rally for another day. Bank of America doesn't think the so-called crypto winter will happen anytime soon. And finally, could crypto change the way we send humanitarian aid to places like Ukraine? Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Kate Rooney. The crypto markets took another step higher today, gaining 4.5% by noon Eastern, and believe it or not, that's actually down from the day's highs. Bitcoin rose by about 6% since yesterday, but that's far from the 16% gain earlier in the morning. At one point, it was worth a little less than $45,000. Ether rose around 4%, meanwhile XRP gained about 3%. For more context on the latest surge, I spoke to Meltem Demirors of CoinShares. Here's what she's watching.
One of the things we always talk about with Bitcoin is Bitcoin as an antidote to chaos that you can buy in your portfolio. That's a narrative I've been talking about for a number of years. I think this is really the first time that we've seen Bitcoin, number one, in an inflationary environment, right? And that's a narrative that's been going on since early 2020 when Jay Powell turned on the money printer, right, at the start of the global pandemic. Second, I think we're seeing an unprecedented level of geopolitical conflict, right, particularly with the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And I think the other factor we can't ignore is I think the Canadian trucker protests and the OSC freezing the accounts of people involved in that protest, including coffee shops who were serving coffee to people, has really just highlighted to people in the Western world how important money like Bitcoin is in a world that's becoming increasingly surveillance oriented, and in a world where banks, in particular central banks, are pushing for more digital money that they can turn on and turn off at the switch of a button. What's also really interesting is the bid didn't start moving, right? So Bitcoin didn't start moving until US trading hours opened. So when the US market opened, we saw a lot of bids on the USD trade pair side. And so I think what we're seeing is this narrative is really catalyzing investors who maybe have been sitting on the sidelines, have been in sort of a risk-off environment, have been contemplating whether or not it's a good entry point. We saw Bitcoin dip as low as 33,000 earlier this month, and now we're back up to 43, 44 range. So I think we've seen a lot of people sitting on the sidelines with dry powder, looking at this macro landscape unfolding. Again, one of the things I always just like to caution people about is when we're making inferences in a very short time period, right? It's very difficult to tell if this is a trend or just a localized event. So one of the things we really look at CoinShares is longer time series of data. And again, I think this narrative around the link between Bitcoin and tech equities, Bitcoin and inflation, Bitcoin and geopolitical turmoil is just going to take some time for us to really understand what that relationship looks like. If it's causal, if it's inversely correlated, there's just simply not enough data at this point, but early trends seem to indicate that all of these factors together are going to lead to a rally in digital currencies.
All right, those are the price moves. Now let's talk about some of the headlines. First, Bank of America says it isn't worried about a crypto winter anytime soon. Analyst Alkesh Shah says that growing adoption of cryptocurrencies will keep digital coins afloat, but that doesn't mean he expects the next bull market just yet. Shah says that many investors aren't ready to buy the dip. He also said that Ether continues to show price headwinds in the near term. Veteran investor Mark Mobius doesn't believe you should buy the dip either. Mobius attributed the recent rally to Russians buying into Bitcoin as the value of the ruble continues to nosedive.
I would not be a buyer, but if I was a Russian, I would be a buyer. It's interesting here in Dubai, where I'm living, a lot of Russians are coming in to buy property. In fact, I was talking to a property agent yesterday. He said they'll buy anything, and they're getting money out of Switzerland. They have Swiss bank accounts. But if they can pay with Bitcoin, of course, that's an avenue to get money out of Russia. So I would say that's the reason why Bitcoin has shown strength now, because the Russians have a way of getting money out or getting their wealth out.
Since the invasion in Ukraine began, Bitcoin transactions in the region have surged to their highest level in months. That's according to data firm Kaiko. Mobius says that without crypto, Russians would have limited options to protect their money. Lastly, the Ukrainian government is looking for ways to spend millions in crypto donations. As of today, Elliptic found that Ukraine received more than $30 million worth of Bitcoin, Ether, and USDT, also known as Tether. Now, crypto exchange Kuna told CoinDesk that the nation's defense ministry is looking to spend that money on the war effort. The millions of dollars sent to the Ukrainian government in just a few short days highlights just how quickly cryptocurrencies can be sent to provide aid. Our own Tanea McKeel spoke to Alex Gladstein of the Human Rights Initiative about how the nonprofit has been sending humanitarian aid to those in need using crypto.
Alex Gladstein, thanks so much for joining me today. To start, what is it that you do at the Human Rights Foundation? I know you've been a real advocate for Bitcoin as a humanitarian tool. Where does the organization stand on that, on Bitcoin? And have you ever used it in your work there?
Sure. The Human Rights Foundation focuses on civil liberties and human rights for people who live under authoritarian regimes worldwide. So that's about 4.3 billion people in 95 countries who don't have the same checks on government power that we might have in, let's say, the United States or Japan or the United Kingdom. So for us, we look at financial freedom, and we look at the fact that people under authoritarian regimes often have their bank accounts frozen. They often have their currency devalued. They often are cut off from the kind of financial privileges that we might have in the West. So, looking at something like Bitcoin, which is open to everybody and cannot discriminate against anyone, and is truly, borderless and neutral and permissionless, is something that we've been doing in an increasing way since about 2013, when we did our very first Bitcoin fundraiser for the pro-democracy movement in Ukraine, actually. And ever since then, we've been trying to put together the human rights community and the Bitcoin community to figure out how people who've been cut off from the financial world can use open source money, open source software to do what they need to do and keep their work going.
Bitcoin has long been touted as an important tool for humanitarian aid by many. Why and how consistent has your experience in your work been with that promise?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's the single best tool for humanitarian aid because it's truly peer-to-peer. And with a relatively recent upgrade to the Bitcoin network called Lightning, Bitcoin can be sent instantly and with virtually no fees anywhere on Earth. So, for example, someone in Ukraine who has just gone into Poland or a neighboring country, who doesn't have a bank account, who has no way of receiving money other than banknotes or coins, they can download on their phone a Bitcoin app, and I can, from San Francisco or New York or Sydney or Buenos Aires or wherever, I can send them $50 in Bitcoin instantly, basically for free. It immediately pops up on their phone, and then they can use any number of local exchanges to convert that to local currency. So for me, looking at Bitcoin, it's just a remarkable humanitarian tool, and I think you're seeing that in terms of the volume of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that are coming to Ukraine's aid at the moment. Actually, as of the moment we're recording, exceeding what the UN has pledged to the Ukrainian people. So I think that's a big statement.
Right. And we saw this morning, too, the ban by Visa and MasterCard. So Russians can't even use their credit cards there. How easy, so, Ukraine or Russia or anywhere else in the world for that matter, how easy is it for someone to use crypto in the middle of a crisis? Can I just download my Coinbase app and be on my way? Or do you need to necessarily be tech savvy in order to be able to turn to crypto?
Yeah. So, look, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are a relatively new technology. Bitcoin itself is money. That's really what it is. So it depends on your ability at the moment to exchange it for other currencies. Thankfully, over the last 5 years, that ability has exploded in terms of just local liquidity in almost any country on Earth. There's somebody willing to buy your Bitcoin with local currency and give you fiat currency for whatever you need. We haven't really seen the days yet of like the average merchant accepting Bitcoin. I think those will come in the coming decade. But for now, what you're seeing is like, if you send Bitcoin to friends or family in Ukraine or Russia, there are avid, local markets there. We even saw this in Belarus. Over the last year and a half, the Human Rights Foundation has helped send in more than $1 million of aid to the Belarusian pro-democracy movement. And a lot of that went in Bitcoin because the dictator had frozen the financial system. And the way it would work is like someone in Belarus or Ukraine, they would receive the Bitcoin onto their phone. You ask how easy it is. It's a simple wallet you can download from the App Store. There's one called the Moon Wallet, MUUN, that I would encourage anyone to check out and try. It's extremely simple and slick and clear. And that person just sends their address or QR code to me, and I send them a certain amount of money, and then they go into any number of like Craigslist / eBay style services where within a few minutes they can swap the Bitcoin for cash. And that's one of the reasons why it makes such a powerful tool, is because it's easy to use.
Before we go, Slow Ventures' Sam Lessin joined CNBC's Tech Check to discuss how Bitcoin's use case is being challenged in the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Here's what he said.
People are going back to, in some ways, the first question of cryptocurrency, which is when you think about Bitcoin as a store of value that doesn't exist with any one government, as you think about it as digital cash in the future of that, how do we think about that? Historically, countries have always had currency controls and thought about this stuff, but in the end of the day, you could never keep average citizens from trading cash between each other. How do we think about that in a fully digital world as you see certain countries and areas very rightfully trying to create higher currency controls and control digital exchange, and other narratives pushing back on that from a decentralized perspective?
With that, you're all caught up for today, but we'll be back here again tomorrow with a lot more. We'll see you then.